Hi, and welcome to the Dr. Brian McDonough Show. My guest is Rick Sommers, and I got to tell you how I know Rick and have gotten to know him better. He actually has his own podcast with a gentleman I worked with back in my TV 29 days, Chris Cimino, who, if you're in New York, is back on the air again on WPIX, and he's been on NBC. WPIX has been weatherman for many years, and Rick and Chris have teamed up to do a show, and this actually is a role reversal because the time you interviewed me, a couple times, it was deep in the pandemic and very serious interviews about, life and death issues. And I remember how well you handled it. And I think they were important conversations. And it was I thought we got a lot of information and I got a lot of positive comments. So, if you're not even in that town and you're getting it, you guys have a pretty good audience.
Well, we hope. We never really know for sure. It's kind of like spitting in the wind. Hopefully there are people out there and enjoying what we do, but we don't really know.
I want to read something, Rick, that you wrote a couple months ago, and this is why we're doing the show. And you've been willing to come on and talk, and I think it's important. And these are your words, which you posted. I remember being 16. Actually, start again. Remember being 16 and getting your driver's license. You felt free, liberated,
Right.
empowered, able to conquer the world. Fast forward 45 years, the numbers have flipped. I'm now 61 and life has caught up with me, or at least the last 28 years since I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. In 1994, I was still able to lace them up and do a nice run in Central Park, or even OJ, that's a flashback, and scramble and take the flight at LaGuardia. Fast forward to 2022, and I now rely on a rolling walker, cane, or handrail. But the 14 stairs in our home have become quite the challenge, which I readily accept. But today I revisited that feeling of enablement. I know that's not a word, and had a stair lift installed. Is this really me? Am I a wuss? I remember crossing the marathon finish line in 1993, and then my new marathon with MS began. There is no finish line, no medal to place around my neck, but a multitude of external and internal battle scars that remind me that getting older, especially with a chronic illness, ain't for the faint of heart. Thank goodness I have the love and support of so many to help me to process and cope. All aboard, next stop, second floor. That is so well written, and it really talks about a battle that, all of us, one diagnosis, one step away, anything
Absolutely.
can happen.
But the truth of the matter is, and Brian, as a doctor, you deal with this every day, having to break news to people that you don't want to break. You'd love to say, "Hey, you look great, everything's fine," but that's not always the case. And I think as I've gotten older, and I will turn 62 in 2 months, and part of this is just getting older, but part of it is dealing with MS now for a very long time and not being able to do what I used to be able to do without even thinking about it. And that's part of what's so frustrating about this particular disease or any disease. And I believe as I've gotten older, you know what? Everybody got everybody draws at least one short straw. Everybody's got something they're going to have to deal with. Well, you don't always know what it's going to be, but these are the cards that I've been dealt, and I try and deal with it as best I can.
Well, you remain remain optimistic, but you also share and try to help others by what you're dealing with. And I know as a physician, that type of sharing is so valuable for so many people because you do feel all alone. People tell me again and again, you feel like you're the only one who got something, and why did it happen?
Right. Yeah. Well, the truth of the matter is, my background, like you, is in broadcasting. Well, I should say, if to be like you, it would be in medicine, but it's not really. But it's in chronic illness now for the past almost 30 years.
Yeah.
And when I was diagnosed in 1994, I remember going to the MS Society in New York City, and they found out that I was working on the radio in New York at a very popular station back then. And they thought, oh, this is great. Meaning they had somebody they could rely on to be a spokesperson, to go and talk to groups, to talk to kids at school, whatever it is. And you you know me at this point, Brian. I'm not shy, and I have no problem whatsoever talking about multiple sclerosis and my own experiences. And some of them have been horrendous, but the truth is, we've all got, our chinks in the armor. And so helping people is the one way that I feel like I can give back that other people perhaps can't.
So tell me a little bit early career. I mean, I learned things. Well, the great thing about the social media is, I can look. I said, oh, I wrote a book about Ithaca. My youngest daughter checked out Ithaca. That was a pretty cool campus. I like that. It must have been fun to go there. And then I say, oh, that's where you started your broadcasting career. And then I'm reading, oh, he was a broadcaster at Ithaca. But look at the other people who came through Ithaca.
Yeah.
At that point in your life, was it a desire to become a broadcaster before you went to college, or was it?
No. That's a really good question. Actually, I grew up. I thought I was going to be a goalie for the Cornell University Big Red, but I wasn't smart enough or good enough to get to Cornell. So I was always sports driven, and I was a little brother. My older brother Peter, 4 years ahead of me, and he was the kind of kid who used to send letters to disc jockeys in New York and ask for advice because he was fascinated by people on the radio, and that's what he wanted to do. And ultimately, he went to Ithaca 4 years before me in the television radio program. My father, who was a lawyer, represented the motion picture industry as a lobbyist and actually was a guest lecturer at Ithaca College. And when it came time for me to go to college, and I didn't get into Cornell, and I don't even remember where else I didn't get in. But the people at Ithaca said, "Well, listen, your first son Peter was so good, and your second kid, meaning me, has got to be probably cut from the same stone. So we'll save him a place here at Ithaca College."
Wow.
And that was a far different world than it is now.
Yeah, but that's great, and you got to go there. I remember there was a big lake on the campus. Of course, you're in the
Oh
Finger.
yeah,
I
it's
remember.
cute. It's one of the Finger Lakes in central New York, and the winters are brutal, but the summers are amazing. And the campus was just spectacular. My experience at Ithaca, was life changing. The one thing we always joke about is uh, Cornell University is also in Ithaca, and we always tell people when they ask, "Where is Ithaca?" We say that's where Cornell University is because that's what they know. And they think Ithaca is a jail because of Attica back in the 70s, if you remember that.
So you go to school, and you have a good experience and get into broadcasting. And did you go right to New York, or did you have to work your
Oh,
way?
no. Well, I'm from New York originally. I mean, just north of the city. And I was an intern at 77 WABC in New York City my senior year. And I'll throw the name Dan Ingram at you,
Mhm.
Ron Lundy. These are other WABC radio personalities who I grew up listening to and idolized. And I got the chance to go to WABC and be an intern or an unpaid slave
Right,
as we
right.
like
That's
to
right.
say. Yeah, and then I put together a tape because I was on the air in Ithaca. I got my first job when I was, I guess, a sophomore at a small AM station in downtown Ithaca, and then going to WABC gave me some sense of what it was like to be in New York City, and said, someday I want to be back here. My first job was actually at a top 40 station out on Long Island, WBLI, which was back then a very popular, powerful station. I got hired there right out of college in 1982 and started there, and always wanted to be in New York. So I spent 9 years honing my craft on Long Island and learning how to be an adult. And it has taken me a long time, but all these years later, I think I've finally mastered the being an adult part. It's taken a long time, though.
So you worked, and you get to New York. Now, when you're in the New York broadcasting market, New York working upstate, those things, I guess a lot of it is communication, and you learn those skills early on, how to talk with other people and to communicate freely.
Yeah, I think I was always, had the gift of gab. And believe it or not, I don't know that I was ever shy, but I was probably reserved. But I was in high school, I think in my high school yearbook, class clown or something like that. But not voted most likely to succeed as you probably were.
I know.
Um,
But I
so
wanted to ask you, so you do this, but you also have social work in your background.
right. Well,
What did that come in? Yeah.
that's the trump card. Pardon the expression. Um, when radio was starting to wane a little bit in the late 1900s. Yeah, it was probably the early 2000s. I
Yeah.
said I better have plan B, and I thought, you know what, maybe I'll take this MS diagnosis and dealing with people and go back and get a master's degree in social work and be
Uh-huh.
able to work with a compromised marginalized population like MS patients. So I went and got my master's, got out of radio totally in 2004, and went to school full time. And it was an amazing experience as a mediocre student as an undergrad, but going to graduate school. And I went here in New York was just an amazing experience that I really, really loved.
So maybe when you got that diagnosis, you started thinking about giving back or what you had dealt with. Because when you first were diagnosed, what was it like? Because obviously you're not expecting that. You're in a marathon. I mean, my gosh, you just had completed a marathon, so you're probably thinking not many people ever even run a marathon, so I'm pretty healthy. And then you get this. When you got that diagnosis, what did it mean at the time?
I'm not sure I understood what it meant. I had my college roommate's brother had MS. He was diagnosed in the mid 80s and he was pretty severely impacted by it, to the point that at the latter stages of his life, he had to rely on a scooter and he had a home attendant who lived with him. He passed away probably about 10 years ago. But that was what I knew of MS was, oh, my life is pretty much over. And back in 1994, there was just a whispering of maybe a drug. There was one that was on the market, and there was a waiting list like 10,000 people long. But that wasn't a drug, as you know, as a physician, that can cure MS because there is no cure. What it could do is slow down the progression.
Right, right,
So basically, I was, waiting to get bumped from my seat and just get a standby on the next flight because I didn't have a clear seat and I didn't know which end was up. And as far as helping people, that was probably the furthest thing from my mind initially.
yeah,
I
I bet.
think it was going through 9/11. My mom's
Yeah,
ovarian cancer, which eventually led to her death I guess that was in 2002. And then my wife was diagnosed with a very early stage of ovarian at the same time my mom was going through it. And
yeah,
she was somebody I had was working with at the time. And when she was diagnosed and I was dealing with all the 9/11 time in our life, I just realized I better have something else to fall back on. I didn't want to count on radio because I didn't know how long it was going to be around. I didn't know how long I was going to be around or how long any of us were going to be around.
right.
So I figured I'd probably try and do something positive with my life other than here's your light FM forecast.
Right, and for those who don't, who aren't from New York or visit New York often, 9/11 was a horrible thing. But talking with people in New York and working up there and talking to people when they heard the plane, coming down the street, those kind of things, and the memories and those types of things. In my case, of going up and covering it, as a news person, and though there were horrific stories, they did impact your life. So you had that psychological impact, but
Yeah.
also we're dealing with a very real personal problem. Your mother, your wife, I mean, all these things. And a lot of people would have folded. A lot of people would have just said, the heck with it. You went the other way, that you decided, I'm going to do something.
Well, I think in part I did. I mean, part of what uh, was one of the I guess branches that fell from the tree was I was married to somebody else at the time, and that really suffered our marriage, and I accept a lot of the responsibility. But realizing what I was going through in my late 30s and all these changes in life,
Mhm.
so my marriage back then suffered, and that was um, really first and foremost when I had to step back and say, I need to figure out what's real and what matters to me. And
Mhm.
I was the kind of kid that was brought up on imagery and trying to do the right thing, but I never really knew what who I was or how intact I was. And it was really a time in I guess 2002. It was really the first time in my life I would say I allowed myself to be alone, to mourn, to try and discern and understand, and just kind of grow up.
Mhm. Let me ask you a little bit tough question, but do you think when they have illnesses like that, you do see people break up if they lose a loved one or if they get particularly ill? Is that from your perspective, is that a major trial for the strength of a marriage, or is it just growing apart because of the events? What would you say?
It's an amazing process to go through. Uh, from married, then divorced, then being back in a relationship years later, and seeing other friends that I have had who have gone through similar um, cases where they were married and somebody was diagnosed with something that was severe or fatal, as the case may be. And I think it really tests your mettle. And I hate to talk in cliches, but it really forces you to kind of drill down and figure out what really matters here. And I mean, it's amazing to me the things that I've gone through in the last 20 years with earlier a girlfriend, now a wife. Um, and I have such respect for people who are caregivers who say, I could be somewhere else. And the thing about this is, Valerie, my current wife, knew I had MS before any of kind of a relationship even started.
Hmm.
So, but it never scared her away. And I'm not sure if I would be the same person on the other side of the fence.
Well, I understand what you're saying. I mean, it takes a certain person to have the strength to not say I'm running away or I don't want to deal with that. The
Yeah.
fact that he did, and now that's an important point when we're talking about living with something like MS or any chronic disease. Having someone to support you and knowing that, how much has that strength of Valerie helped you?
It's it's been really hard for me, and I think part of it is being a man. And then I'll get into some of that psychology, but just not wanting anybody else to tell me, walk slower, do this, be careful. It reminds me of being a little kid again, and I I know that it's all well-meaning, well-intentioned, but having a caregiver there with me every step of the way, she's been there through the bad times and the mediocre times, to the point where I've been catheterized by her, not euthanized, but catheterized. And honestly, nobody signed up for that. I certainly didn't, and she certainly didn't. And this is what amazes me. Honestly, I got to tell you, Brian, my first job out of grad school was at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York in something called the Caregiver Resource Program. And that in itself was a great experience. I only stayed there for less than a year because it wasn't what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
But caregivers and being in that mold, oh my goodness, I can't believe what it's like being a mom. And you know this from raising kids and now grandkids. At least with grandkids, you can say, okay, we've had enough with Roman. You take him back. It's your turn now. But with a caregiver, you can't really do that. As a caregiver, it, I'm always the concern and always the responsibility, and I don't like that
Right.
because it doesn't feel manlike to me.
Mhm. No, I know exactly what you're saying, and it's interesting you talk. I always, with my own patients, the caregivers are often the ones who are the more fatigued, who look in many cases they've aged more than the person who's ill because they're feeling the pressure of wanting to support, and at the same time, it depending on the condition you're dealing with, and we see it a lot with Alzheimer's in particular, where then
Oh yeah.
that person can't really give back mentally, and they have to deal with that on top of it, and it can be tough. In fact, there's a book, excellent book on Alzheimer's called The 36-Hour Day, which talks about the endless nature of it. Does communication help? I mean, obviously you're so good at it. I mean, you're talking to me, but when you talk with your wife, I'm sure when you say I'm frustrated or whatever, that it probably helps that you guys can deal with it together. I'd say talking about that.
It does and it doesn't. I mean, I purport to be a great communicator, but I honestly think that I hold a lot of stuff inside. And one of the things I learned going through my marriage, and I do want to write a book about this, and I'd be interested to hear your perspective as an MD, is that the stuff that you don't disclose, the stuff that you don't talk about, is like a barnacle on a boat that basically attaches itself to the hull. And the more that you don't disclose, the more barnacles you get. The more barnacles you get, eventually they drag the, the hull of the ship underwater until the point that you've got so much water you can't bail fast enough. And that's when you start to sink. So I want to write a book about barnacles, and we all do it because people piss us off, relationships piss us off, and we don't feel comfortable for whatever the reasons, necessarily speaking our part to say, hey, that's not right. And when we withhold that stuff, it really is destructive.
That'd be a great book, and I think it could help a lot of people. I want to ask you also, you talk about some of the worst things that have happened. What are some of the worst things that have happened in dealing with MS for you?
Falls. I had numerous falls, which have been embarrassing because, especially when you're in a city like New York and you fall, and people amazingly run to help you. Nobody's stealing from me. They're helping me. It happened to me today as I was crossing the street. I use a rolling walker, and the curb cut was sloped, and my brakes weren't working on my rolling walker, and I went ass over, and people ran to help me and say, "Are you okay? Can we help you?" That's been really difficult.
Hmm.
I've also had bladder issues, bowel issues, which is just mortifying. But I joke with my friends that, hey, I'm just ahead of the curve. We're all going there at some days. So, you
Right.
know, basically I'm just way ahead of the game. So, when you poop on yourself, remember when Al Roker went through this a few years ago
Hmm.
on the Today Show? I mean, it's just you feel like an infant again, but this is just the cards that I've been dealt, and I can either give up or press on.
And it makes you human. And I've always said in medicine, the greatest gift as a doctor is I always say you see people with their masks off. Like somebody's in a hospital bed, they're not worrying about it. Doesn't matter how much they make, it doesn't matter their position in
Right.
society. They have an illness, and you see who they really are. And it's kind of raw human being, but to be able to be that way, and for some people it's freeing, like knowing that they can share, and then I see them go back to what they were when they feel better too. It's a different personality.
It's funny. For some reason, this image just popped into my mind. But when I was 27 years old, my life seemed like it was perfect. I was young, I was healthy, I was making an okay living, working in radio out on Long Island, and I got married, and I just went into a really bad depression, though I didn't know it was depression at the time. And I went in to see a therapist, and I had that nature of, all right, I'm here. Let's fix this. I've got stuff to do. I got stuff I got to check off my list. I don't have time to do this once a week. So here's my schedule for the next 4 weeks. Let's fix this and get it done with. And he said to me, my therapist, and I will never forget this, and I thought this was so on spot. He said, Rick, it took you 27 years to get this way. We're not going to figure this out in 4 weeks.
Mhm.
And, and years later, God, I was with him probably for about 13 years.
Wow.
And it impressed upon me the importance of having somebody to talk to, having a safe place to go to, and somebody that you feel comfortable disclosing with, because we really do try and put forward our best foot at all times, and it can be debilitating.
Mhm. What do you see in the future? I mean, obviously, you do have a condition which is progressive, but you also have been battling it and battling it quite well for many years, and the medicines do keep improving. There's developments, there's changes. What do you see for Rick Sommers going forward?
From an MS perspective, or my own personal
First from
moving.
MS, and then I'm more interested in from a personal, but initially from an MS perspective, what do you see?
Um, I need to write a book, and I've been saying this. I'm going to be 62 in June. I've probably been saying this for 60, all right, 58 years. I need to write a book. I need to talk about my MS experience in a way that's particularly uplifting. One of the books I read when I was in grad school. Do you remember David Lander from? He was on Laverne and Shirley's. He was Squiggy.
I remember
And
Squeaky. I didn't know the name.
yes,
Yeah,
and
right.
Squiggy had MS, and he kept it a secret as long as he possibly could, because in Hollywood they were going to frown upon anything that was going to be debilitating
Sure.
as far as him being cast in anything. And so David Lander wrote a great book probably 20 years ago called Fall Down Laughing, which I highly recommend to anybody who is dealing with anybody that's got a chronic illness that they're dealing with. David's no longer alive, which is really a tragedy, because he was just a great soul. And I learned a lot from his book, and I learned a lot from meeting him at various MS functions over the years. But I need to write a book. I need to write this book and get off my keister, because the first book I probably should write is about procrastination, because I'm an expert in that.
Well, you got to start tonight. You just got to sit down. Everybody, I've read. I was actually just reading a book, and it was about retirement, but not the financial side of retirement, but preparing and having interest in things. And one of the things they said, so many people want to write a book, but they never write that first page. And
Yeah.
once you write that first page, you make the first page better, and you move on, and then they do really well. So it's just a matter of sitting down, putting anything to paper, and if it's not that good, just revise it.
Well, you know what, Brian? When I get it written, I'm gonna have you be one of my proofers, and
I
I'm
would,
gonna
I'd,
probably ask you if you'll write a forward.
I'd be thrilled. You got a deal. I promise I'll do.
That sounds good.
I got the easier end of the deal. Then I'll take 5 years to write the forward, and the book will sit.
That's okay. Hopefully, hopefully I'll still be alive, and maybe they'll have found a cure for MS by then. But I don't know.
But the other part is you. So you've got this illness. You're not letting it really define you. You're defining yourself. I know you have a heck of a podcast, which, like I said, I've listened to it. I've also fortunately been on it. What other things do you see yourself doing?
Um, I just need to be more involved in life and not give up, because I find myself of late feeling I don't feel like getting out of bed today, and really kind of throwing a pity party at times. So a lot of times I just need to pick myself up by the bootstraps. A year ago, obviously I don't run anymore, but I joined a gym. But getting to the gym was becoming so difficult that I finally got to a point where I said, "Nah, I can't do this anymore." So I gave it up, and I think I've been hurting myself by my inactivity. I need to move, and it's really, I used to not think about crossing the street, and then I got to a point in life where I realized in New York City, don't walk. Flashing means don't walk. It used to mean walk really fast, and I can't do that anymore. And that's just something I've had to digest.
And like you said, I think I want to give you the rest of your evening, but I will tell you that one of the things you said is true. we're all on this path, whatever age we are, where a lot of these things you're talking about are going to happen naturally one way or another.
I know.
Like you said, you're accepting it earlier than you should have to, and yet by doing the things you're doing, you're leaving a legacy. I mean, just what I read at the top of this, that's excellent writing. And for people watching this, I think they'll see, especially if they're dealing with a chronic disease or have chronic illness and they've got a family member with it, I think it can be motivational because you're sharing of yourself, and I don't think a lot of people would do that. I mean, some do, but a lot of people don't. Like you said, they keep it to themselves.
I think if I have a gift, it's going to be to give back to those very people who are looking for a sense of normalcy, a sense of humor, perhaps, because I find that I have to find a way to laugh at the stupidest of things that happen to me or that I do, because it helps me get through. I also had some time doing stand-up comedy many years ago, which helped. But boy, you want to talk about being baptized by fire. That's like being circumcised when you're 21.
I can't imagine getting in front and
Yeah.
just getting destroyed as you're trying to tell jokes. And
That's it. That's it.
that's great. Well, Rick Sommers, I want to thank you first of all for taking the time. If people want to hear more of what you do, your podcast is Middle Aged Warriors. In today's world, you just basically can talk into your smart speaker and say Middle Aged Warriors probably and get it.
Well, let me ask you this as a medical professional, because I don't even know the answer to this question myself. I'm going to be 62. I'm not even sure I'm still middle age.
I think in today's world, you're probably just approaching middle age. I mean, that's the way I view it. It's
Whoa.
like you're right. I mean, I think in the old, I was actually I did a program recently where I was talking to someone about finances at retirement, and he was basically saying, well, the retirement isn't the traditional retirement anymore. People
Right.
are moving on to something else, or because of their state in life, they don't have the pensions and the things they used to have, so they have to continue to come up with things. But that activity and those things are good. So, I think middle-aged warriors, you could get at least another 8 to 10 years out of that. It's too
Right.
You don't want to be like old age warriors. I mean,
Yeah, that's true. I joke with Chris, who just turned 61, I think, yesterday. And I said, you know what, pal, we got to change the name of the show pretty soon because we
yeah,
ain't
well,
going to be MAW anymore.
yeah. Well, Chris is another person. He looks like he's 37 years old.
I know. He looks like a kid.
He's unbelievable that way. But that's one of those TV lifers. You can
Yeah,
see
really. You know what it is? It's the Italian genes and all the olive oil.
That's right.
And as I always say to Chris, and I joke with him, because going through Passover and Easter last weekend, I said, what a conflict in the kitchen, because there was Valerie cooking for Easter and me for Passover. And I said, Jews and the Italians are the same. And I always joke with Chris or anybody I tell this to. The guilt is the same, but the Italian food is so much better.
Yeah, it's kind of like the same being Irish. I think the guild is the same, but the food's a lot better not being Irish too. I tend to agree. So, hey, thank you, Rick. I really appreciate sharing your story and joining us on the Dr. Brian McDonough Show. And the best to you going forward. And I look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you, Brian. And you are just such a treat to spend time with. And I look forward to having you on the podcast again and seeing you in person, maybe even going to a Phillies game.
That would be great. If they could win some, I'll be happy. Okay. Sounds good. Take it easy. Thank you.
The Dr. Brian McDonough Show.